The clinking of silverware against plates echoed through the dining room as our family gathered for another routine Sunday dinner. My husband, Caleb, chatted amiably with my niece, Lila, who had been staying with us for the weekend. The aroma of my famous pot roast filled the air, but little did I know that the evening's events would leave a far more pungent taste. "This is delicious, Aunt Meredith," Lila said, taking another bite. "It's been so long since I've had a home-cooked meal like this." "Thank you, sweetie," I replied with a smile, savoring the moment of normalcy amidst the chaos that was about to unfold. Caleb nodded in agreement, his mouth full. "Your aunt's a fantastic cook. You should come over more often." Lila's gaze dropped, her expression turning somber. "I'm not sure if that's such a good idea." An uneasy silence settled over the table. Caleb and I exchanged a puzzled glance, sensing the shift in Lila's demeanor. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Lila's eyes welled up with tears, and she let out a shuddering breath. "I can't keep this a secret anymore. Dad, he's been doing something illegal at work." The words hung heavy in the air, like a suffocating fog. Caleb's brow furrowed, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "What do you mean, illegal?" he probed gently. Lila's trembling hands gripped the table's edge. "He's been embezzling money from the company. I overheard him talking about it on the phone with someone." My heart sank, and a wave of nausea washed over me. My own brother Derek, stealing from the very company that employed us both? It seemed too outrageous to be true, and yet Lila's distress left little room for doubt. "Are you sure about this, Lila?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "I wouldn't lie about something like this, Aunt Meredith. He's been acting strange for months, always stressed and spending money like it's going out of style. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the evidence is staring us right in the face." Caleb reached across the table, clasping Lila's hand in a reassuring gesture. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. Your dad's going to have to answer for his actions, but we'll make sure you and your mom are taken care of." As the gravity of the situation sank in, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. Derek was my own flesh and blood, someone I had trusted implicitly. Now, his actions threatened to tear our family apart, and I found myself caught in the crosshairs of a battle I never saw coming. The pot roast lay untouched, its once tantalizing aroma now a bitter reminder of the harsh reality that had invaded our home. As Layla's confession echoed in my mind, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I could barely sleep that night, Lila's revelation replaying in my mind like a broken record. How could Derek, my own brother, be capable of such deceit? As morning light crept through the curtains, I resolved to confront him and get to the bottom of this mess. Caleb insisted on coming with me, his jaw set in a grim line. He's not going to like what we have to say, but he needs to face the consequences of his actions. We arrived at Derek's upscale suburban home, the extravagance of it all now glaringly conspicuous. Caleb rang the doorbell, and after a few moments Derek answered, his face falling when he saw us. "Meredith? Caleb, what brings you two here so early?" he asked, eyes darting between us suspiciously. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk, Derek. It's about the company." His expression hardened, and he stepped back, ushering us inside. "What about it?" "Don't play dumb, Derek," Caleb interjected, his tone stern. "Lila told us everything, the embezzlement, the illegal activities. It all ends now." Derek's face contorted with rage, and he slammed his fist against the wall. "That little brat! How dare she stick her nose where it doesn't belong?" "She's your daughter, Derek," I cried, appalled by his callous reaction. "How could you put your own family at risk like this?" He whirled towards me, his eyes wild. "Don't you dare lecture me about family, Meredith. You have no idea what I've had to do to provide for all of you." "By stealing? By breaking the law?" Caleb's voice boomed, his composure fraying. "You've not only betrayed your company, but also your own flesh and blood." Derek let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Says the man who made a career out of locking people up. You're no better than I am, Caleb." The tension in the room was palpable, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I placed a hand on Caleb's arm, silently pleading with him to remain calm. "We're not here to fight, Derek," I said, my voice trembling. "We just want the truth." Derek's shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. "Fine, you want the truth?" he spat. "I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat. After the divorce, I was drowning in debt, and the company was my only lifeline. You think they would have cared if I went under? If Lila and her mother ended up on the streets?" His words hung in the air, a twisted justification for his crimes. Caleb shook his head, his jaw clenched. "That doesn't make it right, Derek. You've broken the law, and there will be consequences." Derek's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "You're not going to do anything, Caleb. Not if you know what's good for you and your precious little family." The veiled threat hung heavy between us, and I felt a chill run down my spine. In that moment, I realized that the brother I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a man consumed by greed and desperation. As we left Derek's house, the weight of his actions bearing down on us, I couldn't help but wonder if we had just opened Pandora's box, and what horrors might lie ahead. Derek's thinly veiled threat hung over us like a dark cloud as we left his house. Caleb's jaw was set in a grim line, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. "That arrogant son of a—" he muttered under his breath, his words trailing off into a frustrated sigh. I placed a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. "Caleb, what are we going to do? He's not going to just roll over and admit his guilt." Caleb's eyes met mine, a steely determination burning within them. "Then we'll make him. I'm not going to let that scumbag get away with what he's done." In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the tenacious prosecutor Caleb had once been, a man who wouldn't rest until justice was served. "Where do we start?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. "We start by gathering evidence," Caleb replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Anything we can find that proves Derek's involvement in this embezzlement scheme." The days that followed were a whirlwind of covert investigation. Caleb pored over financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions, building an ironclad case against my brother. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if I were betraying my own flesh and blood. "I know this is hard for you, Meredith," Caleb said one evening, his voice softer than usual. "But Derek made his choices, and now he has to face the consequences." I nodded, fighting back tears. He's my brother, Caleb. How could he do something like this?" Caleb reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "Greed can make even the most trusted people do terrible things, but we can't let that blind us to the truth." As the evidence mounted, a clearer picture began to emerge. Derek had been systematically siphoning funds from the company for years, using his position to cover his tracks. But it wasn't just the money. He had also been manipulating and threatening those closest to him, including his estranged wife, Elise, and their daughter, Lila. "That bastard," Caleb growled, slamming his fist on the table as we reviewed the latest findings. "He's been holding Elise and Lila hostage this whole time, using their fear and his control over their finances to keep them quiet." I felt sick to my stomach, the depth of Derek's depravity hitting me like a ton of bricks. This was no longer just about embezzlement. It was about protecting my family from a man who had descended into a pit of moral corruption. Caleb's eyes met mine, his gaze unwavering. "We have to stop him, Meredith, no matter what it takes." In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. Derek had made his choices, and now it was up to us to make ours, to stand up against his wickedness and bring him to justice, no matter the cost. As the days wore on, the weight of Derek's crimes began to take its toll. At work, whispers and sideways glances followed me through the corridors, my connection to the unfolding scandal like a scarlet letter. "How could you not have known, Meredith?" Janet, a coworker, asked one day, her voice dripping with judgment. I clenched my fists, biting back the urge to lash out. My brother's actions are his own. I had no idea he was capable of such deceit. Janet shook her head, her lips pursed. "Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" The comment stung, and I fought back tears as I retreated to my office, slamming the door behind me. How dare she insinuate that I was somehow complicit in Derek's crimes? The ringing of my phone startled me, and I snatched it up, struggling to compose myself. "Hello? Aunt Meredith?" It was Lila, her voice trembling. "I need your help." My heart sank and a wave of dread washed over me. "What's wrong, honey?" "It's Dad," she choked out between sobs. "He found out I told you and Uncle Caleb everything. He's furious, and he's threatening to cut me off completely." I could feel the anger bubbling within me, a protective instinct kicking in. "That bastard," I growled. "Don't worry, Lila. We'll take care of this." Hanging up, I wasted no time in calling Caleb, relaying the situation with urgency. His voice was grim, but resolute. "I'll be right there. We're not letting him get away with this anymore." Within the hour, Caleb was at my office, his expression thunderous. He pulled me into a fierce embrace, and I could feel the tension radiating off him. "That son of a bitch has gone too far," he seethed. "Threatening his own daughter like that, it's unforgivable." I nodded, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "We have to stop him, Caleb, before he hurts Lila or anyone else." The drive to Derek's house was a blur, my mind racing with a million different scenarios. What would we find when we got there? Would Derek be reasonable, or would his desperation drive him to new lows? The moment we stepped onto his doorstep, the air was thick with hostility. Derek flung open the door, his face contorted with rage. "What do you two want now?" he spat, his eyes darting between us. Caleb stepped forward, his stance unwavering. "We're here to put an end to your little charade, Derek. The threats, the manipulation, it all stops now." Derek's laughter was like nails on a chalkboard. "Or what? You'll throw me in jail? You don't have the guts, Caleb." In a flash, Caleb had Derek pinned against the wall, his forearm pressed against his throat. "Don't test me, Derek. I won't let you hurt my family anymore." The venom in Caleb's voice sent a chill down my spine, but I knew he was right. We had reached our breaking point, and there was no turning back. As Derek struggled against Caleb's grip, his eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw the true depth of his depravity. This was no longer the brother I had known and loved. This was a monster, consumed by greed and willing to crush anyone who stood in his way. The die was cast, and the battle lines were drawn. It was us against Derek, a fight for survival and redemption. And as I watched the two men grapple, I knew that no matter the outcome, our lives would never be the same again. The confrontation with Derek had been a stark wake-up call, a reminder that we were dealing with a man who had fully embraced his own depravity. As Caleb and I regrouped, the weight of the task before us seemed more daunting than ever. "We can't take him on alone," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in thought. "He's too desperate, too willing to cross any line to protect himself." I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. "What about Elise? She's been living under his thumb for years. She might be willing to help us bring him down." Caleb's eyes lit up, a glimmer of hope flickering in their depths. "That's brilliant, Meredith. If we can get her on our side, it'll be a major blow to Derek's defenses." Reaching out to Elise was a delicate process, shrouded in secrecy to protect her from Derek's wrath. But when we finally met, the pain and resentment in her eyes were palpable. "That bastard has made my life a living hell," she spat, her knuckles white from gripping the table. "He's threatened me, controlled every aspect of my existence, all to keep me quiet about his little schemes." Caleb leaned forward, his voice low and reassuring. "Not anymore, Elise. We're going to stop him, but we need your help." The fire in Elise's eyes was unmistakable, a burning desire for justice that had been simmering for far too long. "Whatever it takes," she said firmly. "I'm done living in fear." With Elise on board, the pieces began to fall into place. Caleb's contacts from his days as a prosecutor proved invaluable as we slowly built a network of allies, disgruntled employees, forensic accountants, anyone who could help us unravel the tangled web of Derek's crimes. But as our efforts intensified, so did Derek's desperation. Lila reported increasingly erratic behavior, outbursts of rage, and thinly veiled threats. It was clear that he was starting to sense the noose tightening around him. "We have to be careful," Caleb warned during one of our clandestine meetings. "Derek's like a caged animal right now, and there's no telling how far he'll go to protect himself." The tension was palpable, a constant undercurrent of danger lurking beneath the surface. But we were resolved, united in our determination to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end. Late one night, as I sat poring over financial records, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was one of Caleb's contacts, his voice laced with urgency. "We've got him," the man said breathlessly. "Ironclad evidence of fraud, money laundering, the whole 9 yards. It's time to make our move." I felt a rush of adrenaline, the moment we'd been working towards finally within reach. Quickly, I relayed the news to Caleb and our team, setting the wheels in motion for the final confrontation. As I looked around the room at the determined faces of our allies, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude. We had started this journey alone, but now we were a force to be reckoned with, a band of unlikely heroes united against a common enemy. Derek's downfall was imminent, and as we prepared for the final showdown, I knew that no matter the outcome, we had already won a victory. We had refused to cower in fear, and we had built a network of allies strong enough to take on even the most formidable foe. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the ultimate act of reckoning. Derek's reign of terror was coming to an end, and we were ready to face him head-on, armed with the truth and a resolve that could not be broken. The day of reckoning had arrived, and the air was thick with tension as we gathered in the conference room at Caleb's law firm. Elise sat beside me, her hands trembling slightly, while Lila fidgeted nervously in her chair. The weight of what was about to transpire hung heavy over us all. Caleb entered the room, a grim expression etched onto his face. "It's time," he said, his voice low and resolute. We followed him down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off the walls like a funeral march. As we approached the boardroom, the muffled sounds of raised voices filtered through the doors. Derek was already inside, surrounded by members of the company's board. Caleb paused, turning to face us. "Remember, no matter what happens in there, we stay calm and focused. This is our chance to bring Derek's reign of terror to an end, once and for all." With a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, and we filed into the room. Derek's eyes widened in surprise, his gaze flickering between us and the board members. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice dripping with disdain. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Whitmore, fixed him with a steely glare. "We've been made aware of some rather disturbing allegations against you, Mr. Reynolds. Allegations of embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct." Derek scoffed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Preposterous. These are nothing more than baseless accusations from disgruntled employees and family members with personal vendettas." Caleb stepped forward, a thick file clutched in his hand. "I'm afraid the evidence speaks for itself, Derek. Bank records, financial statements, eyewitness accounts. It all points to a systematic and calculated effort to siphon funds from this company for your own personal gain." The color drained from Derek's face as Caleb began presenting the damning evidence, each document and testimony like a nail in the coffin of his deceit. "You've been living a lie, Derek," Caleb said, his voice ringing out in the silent room. "And not just with this company, but with your own family as well." Elise rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and resolve. "He's right. For years, Derek has manipulated and threatened me, using our finances as a weapon to keep me silent about his misdeeds." Lila followed suit, her voice trembling but resolute. "He's even turned on me, his own daughter, when I discovered the truth about his crimes." Derek's eyes darted around the room, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before our eyes. "This is absurd," he sputtered, his face flushed with rage. "You have no proof, no concrete evidence." But Caleb was ready, producing a final damning piece of evidence. A recorded phone conversation between Derek and one of his co-conspirators, detailing the intricate web of fraud and money laundering. As the recording played, the silence in the room was deafening, a palpable sense of shock and disbelief hanging in the air. When the final words faded, Derek slumped back in his chair, defeated. The weight of his crimes had finally caught up to him, and there was nowhere left to run. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat, her gaze fixed on Derek with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented here today, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment with this company, effective immediately." Derek's head snapped up, his eyes wild and desperate. "You can't do this. I built this company from the ground up." But his protests fell on deaf ears as the board members turned their backs on him, one by one. In that moment, I saw the true depth of Derek's fall, a once powerful man reduced to a pathetic, sniveling mess, his lies and betrayals laid bare for all to see. As security escorted him from the building, Caleb placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Meredith," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Justice has been served." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders, but the victory was bittersweet. Derek's downfall had come at a great personal cost, tearing our family apart and exposing the darkest corners of human greed and depravity. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by us, Elise, Lila, our allies in the shadows, I knew that we had emerged from this ordeal stronger, united by a shared commitment to truth and accountability. The path ahead would be long and difficult, but in that moment, I knew that we had taken the first steps towards redemption, towards healing the wounds that Derek had inflicted upon us all. The aftermath of Derek's downfall was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. As the details of his crimes made headlines, the public outrage was palpable, a collective sense of betrayal and disbelief that someone in such a position of power could stoop to such depravity. Through it all, Caleb stood by my side, a steadfast pillar of strength and unwavering determination. "We're not done yet," he would remind me, his jaw set in a grim line. Derek needs to face the full consequences of his actions, and face them he did. The criminal charges came swiftly, a laundry list of offenses that would make even the most hardened criminal wince: fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and more. As the court proceedings unfolded, the extent of Derek's deception was laid bare, each revelation more shocking than the last. Elise took the stand, her testimony detailing the years of emotional and financial abuse she had endured at Derek's hands. "He made me feel like a prisoner in my own life," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Always dangling the threat of financial ruin over my head, using our daughter as leverage to keep me in line." Lila's testimony was equally damning, painting a picture of a man so consumed by greed and ambition that he was willing to sacrifice his own family on the altar of his desires. As the evidence mounted, Derek's arrogance slowly crumbled, his once boastful demeanor replaced by a sullen, defeated hunch. When the guilty verdict was finally read, a hush fell over the courtroom, the weight of the moment almost palpable. "Derek Reynolds, you have been found guilty on all counts," the judge intoned, his voice ringing out like a death knell. "In light of the severity of your crimes and the devastating impact they have had on countless lives, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary." The words hung in the air, a collective sigh of relief and vindication rippling through the room. Derek's face was ashen, his eyes vacant, as the reality of his situation finally set in. In the days that followed, Caleb worked tirelessly to ensure that Elise and Lila were provided for, securing a substantial divorce settlement and financial compensation for the years of anguish they had endured. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but an important one nonetheless. As for me, the weight of Derek's betrayal still hung heavy on my heart. He was my brother, my own flesh and blood, and yet he had shown no hesitation in sacrificing everything: our family, our bond, our trust, in pursuit of his own selfish desires. "You did the right thing, Meredith," Caleb would remind me, his arms wrapped around me in a comforting embrace. "Derek made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences." And slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The wounds inflicted by Derek's actions were deep, but with the love and support of Caleb, Elise, and Lila, I found the strength to move forward, to reclaim the pieces of my life that had been shattered. It was during one of our regular family dinners, a ritual we had reestablished in the wake of Derek's downfall, that I finally found a sense of closure. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had endured, I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment, I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. "To family," I said, my voice thick with emotion. and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead. The days leading up to Derek's sentencing were a whirlwind of emotions. Caleb and I had spent countless hours preparing our victim impact statements, poring over every detail, every heartache Derek had inflicted upon us. "This is our chance to have our voices heard," Caleb said, his brow furrowed in concentration, "to make sure Derek understands the true gravity of his actions." When the day finally arrived, the courtroom was packed, a sea of faces eager to witness the final act of reckoning. Derek was led in, his once imposing figure now diminished, his eyes downcast and hollow. As I took the stand, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady, fueled by a deep well of resolve. "Derek Reynolds was once my brother, my own flesh and blood," I began, my words ringing out in the hushed courtroom. "But the man who sits before us today is a stranger, a shell of the person I once knew and loved." I recounted the pain, the betrayal, the utter devastation Derek's actions had wrought upon our family, how his greed had nearly torn us apart, leaving scars that may never fully heal. "You had everything, Derek," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "A loving family, a successful career, a life that so many would envy. And yet, it wasn't enough. Your insatiable greed drove you to sacrifice it all, to burn every bridge and crush anyone who stood in your way." Derek's eyes remained fixed on the floor, his jaw clenched, but I could see the flicker of shame in his expression. When it was Caleb's turn, he did not hold back, his words lashing out like whips against Derek's battered ego. "You are a coward, Derek Reynolds," Caleb said, his voice dripping with disdain. "A selfish, manipulative coward who thought he could bend the world to his will, consequences be damned." He recounted the threats, the emotional and financial abuse Derek had inflicted upon Elise and Lila, his own daughter. "What kind of man does that?" Caleb thundered. "What kind of soulless monster preys upon his own family for personal gain?" Derek flinched, his hands balling into fists, but he remained silent, his head bowed in silent submission. As the judge handed down Derek's sentence, 25 years with no possibility of parole, a sense of finality settled over the courtroom. It was done. The monster had been caged, and justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, a strange sense of calm descended upon our lives. The storm had passed, leaving us battered but ultimately stronger for having weathered it together. Elise and Lila found solace in their newfound freedom, slowly rebuilding their lives from the ashes of Derek's destruction. Lila, in particular, blossomed, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. "It's like a weight has been lifted," she confided in me one day, her eyes shining with hope. "I can finally breathe again, without the constant fear of his wrath hanging over me." As for Caleb and me, our bond had been forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by our shared commitment to truth and justice. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. It was during one of our regular family dinners that I truly felt the weight of what we had endured and what we had overcome. As we gathered around the table, the laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the darkness we had faced, I looked around at the faces of those I loved most. Elise, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of freedom and empowerment. Lila, her smile radiant and unencumbered by the weight of her father's sins. And Caleb, my rock, my unwavering source of strength and love. In that moment I realized that while Derek had tried to tear us apart, he had ultimately failed. Our bonds had been tested, but they had emerged stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by our collective resolve. As I raised my glass, a sense of gratitude washed over me. "To family," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "and to the journey that has brought us here, stronger and more resilient than ever before." The echoes of agreement filled the room, a testament to the power of love and perseverance in the face of even the darkest of trials. Derek's fate was sealed, his legacy one of greed and betrayal. But for us, a new chapter was unfolding, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of brighter days ahead.
I'm an 18-year-old young man, and throughout my life, my parents held exceedingly high expectations for me. They saw me as a representation of their status in society and aimed for me to excel in every aspect. From my earliest years, I felt the weight of their demands as they pushed me to achieve straight A's, win awards, join clubs, engage in sports, and participate in various volunteer activities. My life seemed to be meticulously planned from the moment I entered kindergarten. They insisted that I pursue a course I despised at a prestigious university of their choosing. Their motivation wasn't driven by my future success or financial stability. Instead, it was all about showcasing me as their accomplishment. Throughout my 18 years under their roof, they displayed no interest in my passions, hobbies, or dreams. They never bothered to inquire about my opinions, feelings, or thoughts. Concepts like freedom, privacy, and respect were nothing more than distant dreams in my life. In summary, my parents exerted complete control over every facet of my existence. They imposed strict academic standards, leaving me with no semblance of a social life. They made me dedicate countless hours to studying, even on weekends and holidays. Tutors and coaches were constantly monitoring my progress and skill development. Any mistake or failure resulted in harsh punishments, including public shaming in front of relatives and the few friends I had. Upon graduating from high school, my parents compelled me to apply for the course and university they had predetermined. They framed it as my sole option, denying me any say in the matter. They stressed that following their plan and making them proud was my duty and obligation, threatening severe consequences if I couldn't gain admission easily. They openly stated that university admission held more significance to them than my well-being and life itself. My worth and gratitude were measured solely by my ability to secure admission there. Unfortunately, their chosen course didn't align with my passion for the arts, which they were entirely unaware of. When they discovered this, their anger and disappointment were palpable. They accused me of squandering their time, money, and efforts, and claimed that I had shattered their reputation, hopes, and dreams. They treated me as though I were a criminal, with my father labeling me a failure and a disgrace. The repercussions they had threatened soon became a reality. As soon as they learned of my failure to gain admission, they disowned me and banished me from their lives. They handed me the keys to an old, dilapidated van and instructed me to leave, expressing their desire never to see or hear from me again. In that moment, it became evident that my parents had severed all ties with me. I didn't attempt to explain, apologize, or plead my case. Instead, I simply climbed into the van and drove away. Uncertain of my destination and feeling a mix of hurt, anger, and betrayal, I also experienced an overwhelming sense of freedom and relief, finally liberated from the oppressive grip of my parents. I roamed the streets in search of a place to rest and sleep, eventually stumbling upon a campground where I encountered a group of individuals living in RVs and vans. They extended a warm and friendly welcome, inviting me to join their bonfire and barbecue gathering. As we shared our stories, I confided in them with the unvarnished truth about my situation. In return, they offered empathy and shared their own experiences of leaving behind homes, jobs, or relationships for various reasons. Each had a unique story to tell, some fleeing from something, others chasing dreams, and a few simply seeking new horizons. Nevertheless, they all shared a common theme. They were living life on their own terms. Their acceptance and sense of value provided me with a newfound sense of belonging. Over the course of the next month, we stuck together, enjoying adventures and exploring the local area. We hiked, fished, swam, and indulged in games, all while engaging in lively conversations, laughter, songs, and dances. Together, we relished in food, drinks, relaxation, and mutual support. We also pooled our resources to tackle practical challenges like vehicle repairs, resource hunting, making plans, and ensuring our safety. Moreover, this newfound community helped me recognize the toxicity of my parents' behavior and encouraged me to pursue my interests and passions. They wholeheartedly supported my quest to find my own path and goals, inspiring me with their tales of overcoming adversity to achieve success. That month spent with them was truly transformative. However, during this period, my parents made no effort to reach out to me. The sole family member I had contact with was my grandmother. But my parents had cautioned me not to reveal my homeless situation to her, leading me to fabricate stories about my well-being. My grandmother had always held a special place in my heart, being the only family member to treat me with kindness and respect. She showed me affection, gave me compliments, and stood up for me against my parents' harsh and unreasonable methods of raising me. She valiantly defended me from their cruel criticisms and unjust punishments, providing solace during my times of distress. Despite residing apart from us, she financially supported my parents when they faced financial difficulties, frequently sending me money and supplies. She would call me at least once a week, and her spacious home always had a room set aside for me. She had urged me on multiple occasions to move in with her, and was well aware of my passions, offering unwavering encouragement and compliments for who I was. She never missed an opportunity to boost my confidence, acknowledging my intelligence, talents, and handsomeness. She recognized my potential and was willing to help me seize opportunities. Her love for me was unconditional, a stark contrast to my parents who would often deceive her about my health and misappropriate her money. They eagerly awaited her inheritance, planning their retirement around the belief that they would receive a substantial sum of money and property from her. Before expelling me from their lives, my father had issued a stern warning, insisting that I mustn't divulge anything to my grandmother, knowing full well that she would stand by my side. I chose to withhold the truth from my grandmother because I didn't want to burden her with the knowledge that my parents had disowned me. I didn't disclose the fact that they had forced me out of their house, providing me with an old van and cutting off all contact with me. I kept up this deception not only due to my father's threats, but also because I wanted to shield her from worry, knowing that she was elderly and frail. When my grandmother would call, I continued to lie about my well-being out of love for her. However, I realized that I couldn't deceive her indefinitely. After a month of living outside in the van and making new friends, I decided to come clean and share the truth with her. I mustered the courage to call her and confess everything that had transpired. By the end of our conversation, tears were streaming down my face, and my grandmother, too, was weeping. She did her best to console me and expressed her anger toward my parents, labeling them as heartless, selfish, ignorant, foolish, abusive, and neglectful. She immediately invited me to her home and insisted that I stay with her. Upon seeing me, she embraced me tightly, determined to care for and protect me. She even apologized for my parents' actions, but I was hesitant to impose on her by staying in her home. She wouldn't hear of it and wouldn't let me leave. First, she contacted her lawyer and updated her will, naming me as the sole heir to all her property. She then called my father and informed him that she had learned about everything, reading her will aloud to him. She declared that everything she owned belonged to me and admonished them for their terrible mistake and shameful behavior. She made it clear that she would cut them off from her inheritance, which was a significant blow to my parents, given their financial struggles and their reliance on my grandmother's wealth and property to maintain their lavish lifestyle and social standing. They had always expected to inherit everything from her upon her passing and had taken her generosity for granted. Subsequently, my father reached out to me, followed by my mother. They apologized, expressed regret for their actions, professed their love for me, and claimed to miss me. They wanted me to return home and promised to change. However, I saw through their intentions, recognizing that they were only trying to manipulate the situation to regain access to my grandmother's assets. In response, I laughed at their pleas and hung up the calls. I questioned whether I was being unreasonable for not granting my parents another chance. Despite my desire to continue my journey, my grandmother was opposed to it. She inquired about my academic aspirations and what I wanted to do with my life. My grandmother was well aware of my passion for art, so she suggested that I enroll in a community college in her locality. Despite my parents bombarding my phone with texts of apology, I hadn't made up my mind about forgiving them. My grandmother, however, made it clear that even if I chose to forgive them, she could never do the same for the harm they had caused me. 2 days ago, my mother sent me a photo of my father, claiming he was severely ill but refusing to go to the hospital unless I visited him. Both my grandmother and I sensed deceit in her message, but we decided to investigate. My grandmother, accompanied by her lawyer, planned to drive to my parents' home. If things went awry, she intended to intervene and rescue me. Following our plan, my grandmother visited my parents' home yesterday. Once inside, my mother snatched my phone, and my father locked me in a room. I had instructed my grandmother to wait for my signal, but when she didn't hear from me, she bravely approached the house with her lawyer. Faced with no other choice, my parents had to open the door. My grandmother stepped in, saving me from their clutches. While leaving, my parents attempted to defend themselves, but my grandmother silenced them with her resolve. She intends to take legal action against them. I've decided to cut them out of my life completely. I'm fortunate to have a grandmother like her by my side. Many people dealing with toxic parents have no escape, but I am grateful to have her support. I will take care of her. She's a precious gem. Hey, everyone, I'm contemplating something regarding my cheating fiancé, and I'm seeking your input on whether I'm in the right. Let me share my story with you so you can weigh in. Creating a throwaway account for obvious reasons. I'm a 26-year-old male who decided to propose to my girlfriend of 4 years, a 24-year-old woman. I popped the question 6 months ago, believing that marriage was the natural next step after our healthy 5-year relationship. I was financially stable and confident in my ability to provide for us. However, my perception of our relationship crumbled when I proposed. My girlfriend is incredibly social and active on social media. As I was taking pictures of her with the engagement ring, I noticed notifications from a guy popping up on her phone. Curious, I discreetly checked the messages and discovered that she was cheating on me. Based on their conversation, it was evident that she had been to his place multiple times, and he was eagerly anticipating her next visit. Although I'm not one to invade someone's privacy, I felt compelled to dig deeper. Considering her lack of tech-savvy skills, it was easy for me to access her laptop. She consistently used the same password for most of her accounts. Once, I gained access to her laptop, and the revelations were shocking. I wasn't prepared for what I discovered. My ex had been frequenting a local sex club, which had led to her making a multitude of new friends who had seemingly been more intimately involved with her than I had ever been. At the time of my investigation, she was engaged in conversations with about 7 men. From their exchanges, it was painfully clear that she had spent intimate moments with them. In many of these chats, she demeaned my performance in bed compared to theirs, claiming they were far superior. Reading those words shattered my heart. The person I had loved for the past 5 years had been cheating on me for the better part of 3 years. The weight of this realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt an overwhelming hatred for her, an emotion I couldn't adequately describe. I never thought I was capable of such intense feelings of loathing towards someone I had loved so deeply. I couldn't believe I was entertaining thoughts of harm towards someone I still cared for. That's when I decided on a course of action. I wanted to inflict mental and emotional distress upon her. Perhaps this makes me a morally questionable person, but I was determined to make her suffer the consequences of her actions. I contemplated my decision, slept on it, and ultimately committed to the plan. I pretended that everything was normal between us. I knew about her infidelity, but I didn't let on that I was aware of her cheating. I put on a facade, acting as if everything was fine. We both lied to each other, and I observed her with a fake smile whenever I saw her enthusiastically chatting on her phone, all the while wondering if she was betraying me again. It was torment living with her, but I believed that my revenge would be worthwhile. The plan was straightforward. I had no intention of marrying her. I allowed her to meticulously plan the wedding, knowing full well that it would be a solo affair since I had no intention of showing up. I accompanied her on trips to select wedding details, like flowers and decorations, though I had no intention of paying for anything. I even suggested that I would match her honeymoon expenses with whatever she spent on the wedding. She was delighted, naively unaware that she was racking up a significant bill. Her innocence brought a cynical smile to my face, even in the face of this elaborate revenge plan. I understood that my actions were cruel, but in my mind, I believed she deserved it. I continued to monitor her affairs, and unsurprisingly, she was still engaging in infidelity. Knowing this made it easier for me to witness her financial downfall over a wedding she would be attending alone. With our wedding just 2 days away, I found myself experiencing a touch of stage fright. I couldn't help but question if I would be considered a bad person if I followed through with my plan. After all, she was still cheating on me. Just 30 minutes ago, I confirmed that she was going to meet one of her partners at a bachelorette party. I had discussed my dilemma with my best man, and he believed that my actions were cruel when I could have simply broken up with her. Hello, everyone. I want to express my gratitude for your support and checking in on me. I didn't anticipate that you would appreciate my idea as much as you did. Your support means a lot to me. Now, on to the update you've been waiting for. I decided to go with the suggestion a few of you provided in my direct messages, which was to expose her as the cheater she was. And so, that's precisely what I did. I asked my best man to play a video containing all the screenshots of the chats I had gathered over the months, along with those pictures. I included a brief explanatory message to ensure everyone understood that I would not be showing up for the wedding. I followed through with my revenge plan and told her that I would have an extended bachelor's party and return the night before the wedding. But we both knew I had no intention of returning. I didn't inform my family about this because my parents are close to her, and I didn't want her to find out. Only my best man was privy to my decision not to attend the wedding. As the wedding time approached, my phone was inundated with calls from both my parents and my cheating fiancé. She kept calling repeatedly until the calls abruptly stopped, presumably when the video was played in front of all the guests. Since then, I haven't received any calls from her, and my parents have tried to reach me once or twice, but I haven't answered. I'm reluctant to respond and be forced to explain why I kept my struggles hidden from them. I stayed in touch with my best man, who provided all the details about how the events unfolded. He described the humiliation she felt as the screenshots were displayed, revealing her sexting someone other than me. I had anticipated feeling a sense of satisfaction upon hearing the news, but the emotions I experienced far exceeded my expectations. Hello, everyone. The past 2 days have been quite intense. I finally returned home, which used to be the apartment we shared. The first thing that struck me was the absence of her belongings. It turned out she had moved out during these past 2 days. She left numerous voicemails on my phone, pleading for me to reconnect with her. In some, she sounded angry that I had abruptly exited her life without offering any closure. Yet in the same messages, she would break down, begging for forgiveness for her betrayal. I recognized that her words were driven by her longing for the comfort of our relationship, but I couldn't bring myself to fall for her act again. I had devoted years to her, pouring my heart and soul into our relationship. What had I received in return? Heartbreak. I consider myself fortunate to have discovered her infidelity before marrying her, but it still pains me. I wish I hadn't found myself in this situation. In the following weeks, various events unfolded, and that's why I couldn't respond earlier. My ex decided she wanted me to cover all the expenses she had incurred for her wedding since she hadn't received any refunds and was displeased about it. She took me to court, and after weeks of not seeing each other, we finally faced each other. While I can't provide many details due to the ongoing court case, I didn't have to pay her a substantial amount. It was around 20% of what she had spent, and that was pretty much it. I had assumed that seeing her would evoke no emotions, but I was wrong. I felt terrible in her presence. I couldn't fathom how she thought it was acceptable to hurt me the way she did. I had wanted her by my side forever, while she decided that sleeping with others was a preferable choice. Now somehow I was painted as the villain for seeking retribution. I don't comprehend why she views my decision to distance myself and not forgive her as wrong. In my eyes, and in yours, I haven't committed a wrongdoing, and that's what truly matters to me. Honestly, this will be the final update I provide on this post. I have no desire to revisit the memories of this incident ever again. To the person offering advice, I appreciate your perspective, and you're right. I deserve better than what she has given me. As for exposing her secrets at the wedding, I've thought about it, but I've decided against it. I want to move past this chapter of my life. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's stories. Remember, if you have a story of your own that you'd like to share, Please email it to the address provided in the description below. If you can't give me a grandchild, then we should consider divorce, Jones declared. I hesitated for a moment before responding, "Fine, I got it." But just as he was about to finalize his decision, I surprised him with the news. I am pregnant. You see, I'm a homemaker in my 30s, living with my husband Jones, who works in an office. Our love story began when I was working at a food-related company. Over time, we spoke many times regarding transactions, and I found myself falling for his occasional smiles. So I decided to take the initiative and propose a relationship. However, when I proposed, Jones rejected me saying, "I'm sorry, I appreciate your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend." Yet destiny had other plans. A month later, he approached me admitting, "I broke up with my girlfriend and I would like to be with you." Apparently, since my confession, he couldn't stop thinking about me, which eventually led to his breakup with his girlfriend. I felt guilty for causing their breakup, but Jones reassured me with a smile, saying, "Don't worry about it, it probably wouldn't have lasted long anyway." His kindness saved our budding relationship. After 3 years of being together, we got married. At that time, Jones expressed his desire to have children after marriage and asked if I could stay at home to support him and our future family. I wasn't particularly attached to my job at a somewhat toxic company, so I decided to quit and become a full-time homemaker. The transition from a working woman to a homemaker turned out to be more challenging than I expected. But I didn't mind because our newly life was sailing smoothly, and I was constantly brimming with happiness. We also had the advantage of Jones's family living just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. Initially, I worried about frequent visits and potential issues with his parents, but my fears were unfounded. They were incredibly kind and helpful, always ready to explain things to me gently and kindly. Despite our childlessness, they never complained, often telling me, "You are even dearer to us than a grandchild, and we only have boys in our family. We always wanted a daughter. Please let us pamper you like our real daughter." I had developed a strong bond with Jones's mother, Carol, and I trusted his father, Tom, who might be a man of few words, but he was incredibly reliable. However, this heartwarming relationship lasted only for the first few years. A few years into our marriage, the once kind attitude of Jones's parents began to change drastically. Gradually, Tom became even more reserved, and Carol underwent such a transformation that I began to suspect a dual personality within her. Perhaps this harsh version of her was her true self. To quantify her change, if she was once at a plus 100 before, now she seemed to be at minus 100. That's how harshly she treated me. Living nearby, she started visiting our house frequently, especially when Jones was absent, nagging me incessantly and urging me to show her the face of my grandchild. According to her, it was a wife's duty. She would rush me to have a child. Although not long ago, she used to say, "Children are a gift from heaven. You don't have to try hard. You'll conceive naturally when the time comes, so don't rush." However, her attitude had taken a complete U-turn. She began to pressure me by mentioning other families, saying things like, "The family over there recently had a baby, and the woman next door is pregnant. What about you?" But no matter how much she pressed me for a grandchild, it was all meaningless if Jones wasn't ready. Despite his initial desire for children at the start of our marriage, a year into it, he had completely lost interest. Even my attempts to initiate intimacy were met with rejection. He would decline, saying he was tired, or dismiss me saying, "Don't interrupt my gaming." When I tried to explain this to Carol, she didn't seem to understand and continued pressuring me to have a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to endure her relentless attacks any longer, I finally confided in Jones about the pressure I was facing to have a grandchild. He grumbled his response, saying, "I don't think we need to rush this, you know." Despite his reluctance, he agreed to increase our intimate time together as much as possible. Despite our joint efforts as a couple, getting pregnant seemed elusive. Moreover, throughout this time, Carol kept hurling insults at us, blaming our lack of success on our supposed lack of effort. At times, I suspected that the accumulated stress caused by her constant pressure might be making it even harder to conceive. Unable to withstand her relentless pressure any longer, I reached my breaking point. As a couple, we finally decided to undergo fertility treatments, hoping it would solve our struggles with conception. However, relief was short-lived as a new issue arose, one that centered around Jones. Ever since we embarked on the fertility treatment journey, he began to grow distant, retreating to his room to play video games immediately after returning from work, ignoring my attempts at conversation. Initially, I could tolerate his behavior, but it worsened over time. Jones became increasingly irritable, lashing out over small expenses related to my hobby, and unloading his work stress on me. Whenever I tried to defend myself, he would quickly lose his temper, emphasizing his role as the provider and labeling me a freeloader. No matter how many times I reminded him that I had quit my job to fulfill his wishes, he remained unyielding. One day, when he should have been going to work, I discovered he had quit without informing me. When I questioned him about it, he dismissively replied that it was none of my business. I felt a mix of disgust and helplessness. While I believed we could manage financially for a while through unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings, the fact that he showed no interest in finding a new job stressed me out immensely. With Jones spending his days at home, his main activities revolving around gaming and occasional trips to the convenience store, our face-to-face interactions increased significantly. However, instead of fostering affectionate moments, this newfound time together only intensified our arguments. Our discussions became strained, and gradually, we stopped talking altogether. I found myself questioning the purpose of continuing this married life. The once strong bond between us seemed to be eroding, and the realization slowly settled in that our marriage might be reaching its breaking point. I began contemplating an escape from the dismal situation. One day, utterly fed up with Jones idling away his time, playing games at home like a child, I confronted him. "You're not a kid. Stop playing games all the time and start looking for a job," I admonished him sternly. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, by the way, my mom told me that if we can't have a baby, we should get a divorce," he said casually. To my surprise, I felt a surge of gratitude towards Carol, something I never anticipated. After all, I was pregnant. I had discovered this during a recent checkup, planning to tell him that very night. However, now it seemed like the right decision not to disclose the news. With newfound determination, I said, "Okay, got it." I retrieved the already filled-out divorce papers from a drawer and handed them to him. He seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone produce ready-to-sign papers. He stuttered and froze on the spot, his usual domineering attitude nowhere to be seen. He appeared dumbfounded. Though he seemed on the verge of saying something, the weight of his mother's words weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers, continuously sneaking glances at me. Later, we gathered to discuss matters like property division. In reality, we didn't have much in terms of assets to worry about. While he had previously complained about my spending habits, it turned out he was the one with the more reckless financial behavior. He not only played games at home, but also spent significant amounts of money at game centers, depleting his finances. We had no savings or assets to split, and Jones realized this with growing dismay. Despite this, he pointed to a passbook with considerable savings, suggesting we divide that as well. However, I informed him that this savings account was not subject to property division. "This is the savings I accumulated before our marriage, so it is not part of property division," I explained calmly. His face paled even more. He then tried to claim rights over the condo we lived in. Unfortunately for him, the condo was in my name, and I had already put it up for sale. "You can't live here anymore. It would be a nuisance, so please leave immediately," I said with a smile. "Besides, I thought this condo would become too small in the future, so I've been saving up for a new home," I added, watching his disbelief as I calmly asserted my independence. Saving money had always been my hobby, even when I had a regular job before marrying Jones. I had managed to save a significant amount, which I used to purchase this condo during a period of rapid advancement in my career. As a result, I owned substantial property. Even with the funds from selling the condo, I could afford to build a decent house downtown. Of course, All these assets were acquired during my single days, making them exempt from the current property division. It appeared my husband was unaware of this, as he seemed to believe he would be entitled to half of my assets. Upon realizing he wouldn't be part of the asset division, he was in a state of shock. We continued discussing, but he couldn't recover from his shock. With little left to discuss, the conversation ended swiftly. I submitted the divorce papers at the city office, and our divorce was finalized without a hitch. A few months later, I returned to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support during the birth of my child. I safely delivered a healthy baby boy whom I named Ethan, a name borrowed from the Bible. Now, I spent my days contentedly with my loving child and parents. Of course, I hadn't informed Jones about our child, fearing Carol's interference if she found out. Meanwhile, Jones, who was evicted from the condo, retreated to his parents' home, but seemed to have become a recluse due to the shock of the easy agreement to the divorce. Occasionally, when he ventured out, his appearance seemed so suspicious that he often attracted the attention of law enforcement, making his situation quite pitiful. Later, I heard that he had quit his job due to interpersonal relationship issues. Apparently, he had a contentious attitude even at the office, especially disliked by female employees, leading to his isolation. Unable to cope, he abruptly quit one day. Perhaps he had always been that way, only showing kindness in front of me, a deceptive facade. 3 years later, I worked as the manager of a craft store, and it became a regular haunt for me. Around that time, the store owner approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I'm getting old and thinking of retiring. If it's all right with you, would you like to take over this store?" Considering my parents' active help with childcare, I had ample free time. The idea of having a job to keep myself occupied seemed appealing. Besides, declining the offer would inconvenience many regular customers, so I accepted without hesitation. As I was serving one of the occasional regular customers that day, I received an unexpected visit from Carol and Jones. Their thinly veiled flattery about the store irritated me. "Well, what brings you here?" I inquired. Carol mumbled something incomprehensible, eventually demanding, "Give my grandchild back to me." Evidently, she had learned about my child's birth and was contemplating making the child her heir. "Why did you keep it a secret?" "We were already in the process of divorcing," Jones accused, clearly agitated. "I kept quiet because I wanted the divorce. I knew you both would do anything to prevent it if you found out I was pregnant," I shot back, glaring at them. Carol persisted, insisting that I return her grandchild, emphasizing the 3 years we had spent together. Her demand left me utterly flabbergasted. Just then, my parents and Ethan entered the scene, sensing the tension. They asked, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It appeared that they hurried over after receiving a message from a regular customer. Spotting Ethan holding hands with my parents, Carol approached him, cooing, "Oh, how cute. He looks just like Jones when he was a child." "Look, I'm your grandma." I attempted to intervene, but Ethan, with surprising determination, declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. Consequently, my mother politely asked Carol to leave. However, Jones attempted to forcibly take Ethan away from my parents, shouting, "Just give the kid to my mother." I stood in front of him, trying to protect Ethan, but my physical strength was no match for his. I was easily pushed aside. Jones was inches away from grabbing Ethan's arm when, out of nowhere, my father executed a perfect shoulder throw, sending Jones flying into the air. I looked up in astonishment to see my father, a skilled police officer who had even competed in national championships during his student days. Jones, completely unaware of my father's abilities, could only stare in pain and shock. My father, unfazed, said, "If you intend to bother my child and grandchild any further, I'm ready to take necessary actions. What do you want to do?" He showed his police badge to Carol, who turned pale, and they both hurried away. I never found out what happened to Carol and Jones after that, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Several years later, Ethan began aspiring to become a police officer, inspired by my father's courage and skills. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too, so I can protect Mom," he declared. Under my father's guidance, Ethan diligently worked on his studies, and his martial arts skills became unbeatable among his peers. I plan to continue watching over my wonderfully grown son, grateful for the support and protection my father had provided. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you found the content relatable, please consider leaving a positive rating and a comment. I've always held a special place in my heart for my grandparents, a sentiment that dates back to my early years. Perhaps it was because my parents were frequently away due to work commitments that I found solace in the warm embrace of Grandma and Grandpa. My name is Hilda, and at 31 years old, I stand on the brink of motherhood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of my first child. In these final months of my pregnancy, excitement bubbles within me, yet it's tempered by a nagging concern. My husband, Owen, who just turned 32. My worry stems from the subtle transformation I've observed in him. Lately, he's grown increasingly irritable, a phenomenon that coincides with what experts term digital caregiving. It was during an incident at my grandparents' house, where Owen was setting up their Wi-Fi, that his frustration reached a crescendo. Despite my grandparents' lack of need for Wi-Fi, we visited them occasionally. However, Owen's annoyance was palpable when he couldn't access his favorite paid movie site. He grumbled incessantly, even though my grandparents had personally funded the installation to accommodate his interests. His discontent seemed boundless, and he criticized every aspect of the installation process. My grandmother tried to correct his mispronunciations, pointing out that it was Google, not goggles, and Chrome, not columns. But her corrections only elicited a loud click of his tongue in response. I empathized with his frustration, but it left me with a sense of unease that defied explanation. Eventually, the installation was completed, but the atmosphere grew tense, far worse than the challenges of physical caregiving. It felt like a different, more insidious form of caregiving, one imposed by the digital world. I attempted to reason with Owen, suggesting that there were computer classes available for the elderly, that he could learn from someone else. I even proposed hiring professional help if needed, but he dismissed my concerns with a sarcastic remark, expressing his fatigue and promptly left for his surfing hobby. This behavior was a departure from the man I married, a man who was once patient and kind. In the wake of his temperamental outbursts, Owen's attitude seeped into our home, leaving me feeling abandoned and helpless. I found myself seeking refuge at my grandparents' house, where I unwittingly vented my frustrations. My grandparents, wise in their years, offered a perspective that struck a chord with me. Perhaps, Grandma gently suggested, your husband feels like the impending arrival of the baby is pulling you away from him. The reason my love for my grandparents runs deep is their invaluable life experience, which they generously share as guidance. One evening during a visit, as I prepared to bid them farewell, my grandmother, in her thoughtful way, acknowledged the challenges of managing household chores while pregnant. She handed me a dish of homemade mac and cheese, a small but heartfelt gesture. However, when I served the same mac and cheese for dinner at home, my husband's complaints were swift and unrelenting. Ignoring his grumbles, I gently caressed my growing belly, now more susceptible to frequent kicks and agonizing back pain. My grandmother had prepared the meal with my condition in mind, but the issue went deeper. My husband's concern grew evident as he questioned my frequent visits to Grandma and Grandpa's, connecting it with my choice to bring back mac and cheese. I believe that serving the dish should be evidence enough of my love for him. But much like prenatal depression in expectant mothers, my grandmother suggested that something might be troubling him as well. He expressed his dissatisfaction with our dated dishes, comparing them to the cuisine of the 80s, before announcing his plan to go surfing. He dismissed the idea of eating the mac and cheese, seemingly convinced that the allure of modern pasta would outweigh his nostalgia. With a resigned sigh, I sat alone, wondering if the arrival of our baby might change his perspective, as my grandmother often emphasized the transformative power of a newborn. My hope was faint but persistent. I believed that our child's presence could lift the blues that had settled over us. The labor was grueling, 7 hours of intense pain followed by 3 more in the delivery room. It was a challenging initiation into motherhood, yet the sight of our baby's face made every hardship inconsequential. Despite being tiny, The baby resembled a miniature human down to their tiny fingers. I thought that perhaps my eternal blues and my husband's gloom could both dissipate in the face of this new life. Unfortunately, my husband never visited the hospital during my stay, nor did he make an effort to meet our newborn. Instead, when I returned home from the hospital, I was met with his continued absence. He questioned, his doubt evident in his eyes. Is this really my child? You've often left home, claiming to visit your grandparents. I find it hard to believe. As I stood on the doorstep, holding our newborn, he coldly demanded, "Give me some of your hair. I need a DNA test to confirm if it's really your child." My heart raced with disbelief. Where did this come from? I thought. I had just endured the excruciating pain of childbirth. Was it fair for him to accuse me like this? Anger surged through me, an intensity I had never felt before. Was he really accusing me of infidelity? What infuriated me more was Owen's complete lack of joy in the presence of such an adorable baby. It felt like my very essence of motherhood was being negated. The next day, pushed beyond my limits, I poured out my grievances to my grandparents, who had come to check on the baby. My grandfather, perhaps trying to offer support from a male perspective, said, "If you haven't done anything wrong, why not take the DNA test? Women can hold their heads high if they are innocent, but sometimes men need evidence to believe. Sharing objective facts is important. If this clears the suspicion, ask him to make it up to you with a nice cake or something." His words did offer a measure of solace, so I decided to submit my hair for the DNA test. I hadn't done anything wrong, and if this resolved things amicably, so be it. I convinced myself of my innocence. However, a week later, Owen slammed a paper with the test results in front of me, his face triumphant. "The test result is here. It's not my child. What's the meaning of this?" he declared, pointing at the paper that confirmed the absence of any genetic match with him. I stared at the paper in utter shock. "This is evidence of adultery," he stated, his voice laced with accusation. I was dumbfounded, with no memory of such an event. Clutching the damning evidence, I went to my grandparents' house, where tears flowed freely in their comforting embrace. After a brief silence, my grandfather spoke gently. "Hilda, you used to come to our house when you were in trouble, didn't you? It's okay. Leave the rest to me." He patted my shoulder with his wrinkled yet reassuring hand and then tenderly stroked my hair. The baby's soft fontanelle, yet to close, felt delicate beneath my touch. From my childhood, my grandfather had always reassured me, saying, "It's okay," and he continued to do so today. Large, heavy tears spilled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." A few days later, my grandfather made a significant move. He called Owen, summoning us all to their home for a weekend discussion, a discussion inevitably leading toward divorce. Owen arrived, his arrogance evident as he looked down at me, deliberately placing the DNA test results he had shown me earlier onto a table. While my parents were aware of the impending discussion, only the four of us, my grandparents, Owen, and I, were present, per my grandfather's decision. "For now, leave it to me," he had said. As we gathered in the living room of my grandparents' house, my grandfather began the conversation. He distributed copies of the DNA test results, irrefutable proof that there was no blood relation between Owen and the baby. Everyone examined the paper, and my grandfather proudly stated, "This is from Adam's clinic, as written here. There's no denying it." Owen, clearly baffled, asked about the appraisal. "What appraisal?" he questioned, his confusion evident. With an ominous chuckle, my grandfather placed some similar-looking hair on top of a copy of the appraisal result that Owen had prepared. "This is a genuine document from Adams Hospital where the DNA test results are recorded," my grandfather explained. "I had a test done to check the relationship between Grandma and her daughter, in other words, between Hilda's mother and her." I blinked in confusion, struggling to comprehend the situation. "Why?" I stammered, trying to make sense of it all. "Take a good look, Hilda," my grandfather grinned. "Compare this DNA report with the one he brought. The format, the style of the document, completely different." Beads of sweat formed on Owen's forehead as my grandfather continued. He recounted how, feeling slighted by Owen's suggestion, that I attend computer classes for the elderly. He had indeed attended one. There, he had met a doctor from Adams Hospital. The doctor's familiarity with an appraiser led to an unexpected turn of events. When I saw the appraisal result that Hilda brought, I wondered why it was done at Adams Hospital instead of the Harris Maternity Clinic, where Hilda gave birth, my grandfather explained. I assumed that if it was the maternity clinic, they would have conducted the test using Hilda's saliva. Truth is stranger than fiction. Up to this point, the grandfather's eyes had been filled with disbelief. When I asked the doctor at Adams Hospital, he continued, he confirmed that your granddaughter hadn't taken any tests here. After further discussions, he suggested that showing you our official document would expose the lie clearly. Owen began to tremble. This is forgery of private documents, the furious doctor at Adams Hospital had declared. You should prepare for serious repercussions. I'm sorry, Owen finally admitted, tears streaming down his face. It was reckless. I never thought I'd get caught. What do you mean, never thought? That makes it even more unforgivable, the grandfather reprimanded sharply. I have no intention of forgiving you. I want to make this a tale to take to the grave. Let me tell you how I uncovered the lie. The roles of detective and suspect reversed. Listening to Hilda's claim, the grandfather decided to investigate using the computer skills he had recently acquired. With practiced movements, he logged into the computer and performed a search. I did an image search for DNA test certificates, he said, emphasizing the words Google Chrome as his grandparents engaged in a light-hearted comedy routine. The very first image that came up was identical to the document my husband initially showed me. Owen, now sobbing, was handed a bundle of papers by the grandfather. Naturally, we're curious about the motive behind this forgery, the grandfather said, his tone stern. I hacked into your computer. Upon hearing about Owen's surprisingly technical skills, he reflexively raised his head in astonishment. Hacking. It wasn't just him who shouted, I did too. To be precise, I snooped into your computer, the one in your room. How did you know the password? It must be 4646 or 4633. Owen stammered in surprise. I heard it from a retired cop I met in a computer class, I said, explaining further. The surfers around this area mostly use 4646 or 4633 in their pins. Ah, Owen exclaimed in realization. It means going off. Exactly, I confirmed. The senior network at the computer class is something to be feared. So I tried inputting it on a whim, and lo and behold, I got access just like that. Grandpa continued, his excitement palpable. But cracking the password is impressive, but there's more. You know, when you look at the timeline on Google Maps, it shows all of your activity history. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the table. The ink on the fake DNA test report is smudging, so I investigated. And just so you know, this wasn't taught in class. I found this method by searching tirelessly to protect my precious grandchild. I searched for all the days when Hilda came to vent and the days you went surfing. I was shocked. All the destinations were shady motels. Here's the printed proof, Grandpa declared, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. But this alone won't. No, this is more than enough, don't you think? Ready to confess. Owen hesitated, but before he could respond, Grandpa ignored him and brought over a tablet. I borrowed all the data saved on your computer. Allowing messages to be viewed on the computer backfired on you. Flirting with this woman called Mally, I've transferred all that data onto this tablet. Grandpa opened the tablet screen, revealing a flood of evidence of Owen's infidelity, including messages like, Hotel Lagoon was nice, and I really want us to be a real couple soon. Winky face. Owen couldn't say a word anymore. It was you who told me to go to the computer class, wasn't it? Grandpa delivered the final blow, his voice firm with disappointment. How dare you neglect your heavily pregnant wife at such a delicate time? Realize the lowly act you have done as a man. You don't deserve to be the father of my adorable great-grandchild. You framed Hilda for cheating, hurt her, and used your own child as an excuse to frolic with your mistress. It's absolutely disgraceful. You deserve to be punished. Owen could only bow down in submission as Grandpa added insult to injury. I've copied the forged data from the DNA test report you made as evidence of your criminal activity, he said, rendering him completely incapacitated. Naturally, I ended up deciding to divorce him right after giving birth. But I received a hefty amount of compensation for his adultery, and of course, from his mistress as well. I made him pay child support in a lump sum. So financially, I've gotten a bit comfortable. I'm thinking of looking for a daycare for my child to attend soon. As the saying goes, when the money is gone, so is the relationship, and it was exactly the case with him and his mistress. I got inundated with crying emails from Owen saying, "I'm broke, and the woman has left me. Please take me back," but I promptly blocked him. More importantly, he's being sued by Adam's clinic for forging private documents. There's no way I could reconcile with such a person. Meanwhile, my child has been lovingly welcomed by my grandparents. Recently, they've started to chuckle at the sound of the bell when hitting a stuffed roly-poly toy with their fist. Children grow up fast. Looks just like Grandma, doesn't she? She's going to be a beauty, Grandpa says. No way, she's going to be much more beautiful than me. Grandma laughs too. Let's take pictures and make a photo movie. A baby's face changes every day. Grandpa, in a good mood, heads to his beloved computer. Thank you, Grandpa, Grandma. I really love you both. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment. My fiancé and I made a mutual decision to embrace an open relationship a year ago. We established clear boundaries. While physical interactions with others were allowed, emotional connections beyond our partnership were off limits. However, my suspicions grew when I began to suspect he was developing an emotional bond with a woman he had been physically involved with. As our wedding date approached, I found myself wanting to close the open relationship due to its impact on our bond. I had engaged in purely physical relationships with 4 men, adhering to our agreement. On the other hand, my fiancé had intimate encounters with several women, but it seemed there was nothing more to it. That was until I discovered he had been seeing one particular woman for at least 3 months. My investigation revealed that he was taking her out for dinners and lunches, messaging her daily, and even planning work trips together. This emotional involvement crossed the boundaries we had set, leaving me feeling furious and betrayed. I resolved that I couldn't proceed with our relationship under these circumstances. I wanted him to end his emotional involvement with her. Otherwise, I couldn't go through with marrying him. We had promised to prioritize each other, and his actions had clearly violated that agreement. I planned to confront him that evening, seeking an explanation for his breach of trust and honesty. I didn't form emotional connections with other men and remained faithful to our agreement. You see, he must have been deeply hurt by my initial suggestion of having friends with benefits. The problems in my relationship with my fiancé came to a head on a Friday, shortly after I discovered his emotional involvement with a woman he had initially only had a physical relationship with. Our open relationship began last year, but we had been exclusive before that. On that fateful Friday, he went to her place after work, intending to return on Saturday. However, he informed me on Saturday that he would be staying until Sunday. He explained that she was unwell and had a migraine coming on, so he wanted to make sure she was okay before leaving. I called him out on his excuses, as it seemed unnecessary for him to stay with her for a migraine. He insisted he was being honest and promised to return on Sunday afternoon, which he did. Afterward, I confronted him about my knowledge of his relationship with this woman, which we both agreed was off limits in our open relationship. We had agreed to physical partners only, without emotional connections to others. He seemed taken aback by how much I knew about his interactions and outings with her. I confessed that I had looked at his email and WhatsApp messages, which enraged him. He refused to engage in further conversation, but I pressed him, knowing he was hiding something. Eventually, he approached me and dropped the bombshell. He had been contemplating our relationship and had concluded that he no longer wanted to marry me. When I inquired if he was ending our engagement, he went further, stating he was done with the relationship altogether. Amid heated arguments about his infidelity, he admitted that his decision was directly linked to his deep feelings for this woman. He confessed to being in love with her and acknowledged that he had cut ties with all his other partners because he was emotionally invested in her. He described feeling loved and cherished when with her, appreciating that she had chosen to be exclusively with him. He declared his intention to commit to her. I expressed my desire to close our relationship and be only with him, realizing that the open arrangement was not working for us. However, he firmly refused, asserting that he couldn't end his relationship with her, and that he no longer cared to make things work with me, as everything had changed irreparably. I reminded him that he had agreed to open our relationship and had been involved with several women. Yet, he was now holding me responsible for our mutual decision. He denied blaming anyone, expressing that he initially believed the open relationship would work out fine. However, over time, he found the experiences empty and felt pathetic engaging in casual encounters. He described the encounters as meaningless and admitted feeling terrible about it all. He stated his desire for complete commitment, expressing his preference for a more meaningful connection. He didn't offer an apology for emotionally cheating behind my back. When I pointed out that he was ending years of commitment and an engagement for a mere 3-month fling, he coldly insisted it wasn't just a fling. I couldn't believe his detached and indifferent demeanor. Although he didn't explicitly say it, he was seriously contemplating moving in with her after only 3 months. His words left me devastated and hollow. I am torn between waiting for him to realize he might be rushing into this new relationship and abruptly leaving our life and home together, or letting him go and seeing if he ever comes back to me. I feel too shocked and confused to react, spending the entire night awake, trying to comprehend what happens now. We were supposed to get married later this year, and the thought of canceling our plans and telling everyone it's off is unbearable. My mind is overwhelmed, and I am struggling to cope. As for whether I should inform the other woman about his engagement, I'm unsure if she is aware of it. Reading the comments, I am left feeling like I am the one who played a game and ended up with a heart-wrenching prize. The situation has turned, and he has closed the door that we once opened, leaving me standing on the other side in disbelief. How does it make you feel to picture him taking this woman out for a romantic candlelit meal, filled with sweet, tender moments? Does it churn your stomach and shatter your heart? The truth is, when you hinted that he wasn't enough for you by suggesting sleeping with other guys, you made him feel inadequate. From a purely rational perspective, he thought he was better off finding someone else than staying with you. After all, you implied there was someone specific you wanted to be with, even if you didn't explicitly say it. I know it might not be the most ethical path, but in his eyes, it seemed like the right thing to do, especially since you had experience with open relationships in the past. Furthermore, despite your claim of no emotional attachments outside your relationship, you were never emotionally available for him. So he found someone else, someone who, in his own words, made him the sole focus of her affection. You can't salvage this, nor should you try. Your selfishness and neglect pushed him away, and while he's not blameless, he's far less at fault than you. Let him go and find happiness. Don't bother contacting the other woman because she's evidently closer to him than you are now. I agree with all of this. Despite OP's attempts to justify herself, she fails to grasp the gravity of her actions. The relationship was opened up as a last resort when things were falling apart. His self-worth deteriorated, and this was never communicated properly. It's clear he was deeply hurt. Frankly, it doesn't seem like OP has the choice to close the relationship anymore, considering how oblivious she appears to be. I can't help but wonder if this is some April Fool's Day prank, because the situation seems almost too absurd to be real. If it isn't a joke, it's downright creepy to think someone like OP exists out there. I'm sorry for your situation, but belittling others won't change the reality. Now for the next story. I, a 20-year-old female, pushed my 19-year-old male boyfriend into an open relationship, and now I fear he's going to leave me. The title pretty much sums it up. We've been dating for almost 3 years, starting back in high school. Our intimate life used to be amazing, but recently it lost its spark. My best friend at the time suggested that the only way to fix the relationship was by opening it up. So I sat down with my boyfriend and explained what an open relationship entailed. I was genuinely excited about this new experience, but my boyfriend was initially hesitant. It took a week of convincing and explaining the pros and cons for him to agree. It was clear that he had reservations, as he believed it would permanently alter our relationship. Despite his reluctance, we opened up our relationship, and a few months passed. During this time, I engaged in a physical relationship with one of my coworkers, devoid of any emotional attachments. It was enjoyable, but I began to miss being intimate with my boyfriend and yearned to return to monogamy. However, my world was turned upside down when I discovered that my boyfriend was sleeping with far more people than I was. What hurt even more was that many of these individuals were from our high school, and the ultimate betrayal was that he had fallen in love with the concept of an open relationship while I wanted to revert to monogamy. I felt betrayed and conflicted about how things had unfolded. As for the top advice, well, it seemed like my plan had backfired. I recognized that but desperately wanted to return to monogamy, even though my boyfriend was enjoying the open relationship concept. The phrase, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, resonated with my situation. Others pointed out that I wasn't betrayed. I had pushed for this arrangement. Now that it seemed to be working for my boyfriend, I couldn't suddenly ask to close it. I was told I might have to live with the consequences of my actions or risk the relationship collapsing. My friend's advice had been misguided, and there were better ways to address relationship issues than taking such a drastic step. Ultimately, I was advised that I couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. My boyfriend was content with the current arrangement, and my choices had led us down this path. Ending the relationship might be the only option if we couldn't find a compromise. I was cautioned against thinking he would just leave me, as he seemed satisfied with the open relationship. Now, everything seems to be going well on the surface, despite how I'm truly feeling. If I were to tell him that I no longer wanted an open relationship, he probably wouldn't agree to end it. He enjoys the freedom of the open relationship, relishing both physical intimacy with others and the comfort of having me at home. It's evident that I've made a mistake. As for the last story, I'm a 29-year-old woman in a 2-year relationship with my 31-year-old boyfriend. I wasn't content with our monogamous relationship, so I initiated the conversation about an open relationship after a year and a half. My motivation wasn't dissatisfaction with him. Rather, I missed the excitement of flirting in new relationships, which I knew I couldn't recreate with him. We set some ground rules. Each of us could have one extra partner at a time, strictly friends with benefits, not one-night stands. These partners couldn't be people already in our lives, and we couldn't see them more than once a week without the other's permission. Additionally, bringing them home required mutual agreement. Initially, the open relationship seemed like a good solution. I had the opportunity to explore new connections without diving into a string of physical relationships. However, my boyfriend started seeing Christine. He followed all our rules and was transparent about his interactions with her. Yet he didn't stop seeing her. Despite my attempts to move on from people to avoid attachment, he continued seeing Christine for 4 months. Recently, he suggested a threesome with her, and I reluctantly agreed to meet her for coffee without him present. The encounter left me feeling angry and uncomfortable. I cut the date short and informed my boyfriend that I was not interested in pursuing a threesome with her. What frustrated me most was his refusal to consider a threesome involving my friend with benefits, despite my openness to one with Christine. He outright rejected the idea and wouldn't even meet my friend, despite me meeting all of his partners. The situation left me feeling frustrated and confused about our relationship dynamics. I've reached a point where the open relationship doesn't matter to me anymore. Is there any way to close things up again and move past this? Some general advice. Treat others how you want to be treated. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And for the vast majority of people, open relationships are a terrible idea. In retrospect, asking for an open relationship seems selfish now because it was all about me scratching my own itch, not about exploring something meaningful with my partner. When my boyfriend followed the rules I set, I selfishly decided to close the relationship due to my own jealousy. This situation makes me question my emotional capacity to handle either a healthy open relationship or a healthy closed one. It feels like this post perfectly embodies the typical progression of open relationships. For many men, the hardest part of opening a relationship is their partner having physical intimacy with other men. For women, it's often dealing with the emotional connections their partner forms with other women. At the beginning of an open relationship, when both partners start exploring with others, it's usually more challenging for the man. He has to navigate his emotions and do a lot of emotional work, whereas the woman often finds it relatively easy and is enthusiastic about the non-monogamous lifestyle during this time. However, complications often arise when the man starts bonding deeply with another partner, forcing the woman to face difficult emotions. At this point, instead of dealing with her feelings, she might demand to close the relationship and use various tactics, like vetoes and new rules, to keep the relationship effectively one-sided. It's important to understand that suggesting an open relationship and then getting upset when your partner engages in one is precisely why this idea is problematic in the first place. Not everyone desires casual encounters with strangers, especially if they're in a relationship. As for my specific feelings when meeting the other woman, it wasn't just about her looks. She wasn't the type of girl I expected my boyfriend to be interested in. I'm taller and more athletically built, into hiking and climbing, while she's petite with a push-up bra, fitting the typical cute girl image. It's not about jealousy. It's about the surprise that the girl he chose as his friend with benefits doesn't match my expectations. And that concludes this discussion. If you have any thoughts to share, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. See you in the next one. Good day, everyone. My life took an unexpected turn when my husband walked in on me in a compromising situation with another man. The aftermath of that moment was nothing short of catastrophic. His immediate reaction led to a 5-year jail sentence, my family's disdain, and my overwhelming self-loathing for shattering the image of our seemingly perfect family. I often find myself lost in thoughts of regret, repeating the same self-condemning mantra late into the night, especially when the silence in my once happy home becomes too loud to bear. My children, who were once the center of our universe, are no longer here. My ex-husband despises me with every right to do so, and my immediate family is torn apart. I never managed to forgive myself for the selfish act I committed back in 2015, right after turning 39. I now confess that I took my ex-husband for granted. He had always shown me love, complimenting my beauty daily and seeking intimacy regularly. He treated me as an equal, not a queen or princess, for we were partners in the truest sense. Our journey started in high school, and we remained each other's sole and steadfast companion. Everything felt just right. My family adored him, and my brother looked up to him as a role model. He had helped countless people in difficult situations, always the one they called when in trouble. Through the years, he proved himself to be a good man. We were blessed with 2 strong-willed sons, who, at the time of this incident, had grown into 2 wonderful young women. But over time, I let myself go, feeling self-conscious about my weight. He continued to tell me I was beautiful, even as we encountered few arguments that were usually about our physical relationship, or rather, the lack thereof on my part. It wasn't that I didn't want to connect with him in that way, but my mood often just didn't align. He understood, and we communicated openly about our desires. However, when I turned 39, my birthday party revealed a new version of myself. I had spent an entire year at the gym, practicing yoga and Pilates, and had managed to transform my body from 180 to 135 pounds. It was a remarkable achievement, especially for someone who had always been a bit heavier. My ex-husband also began his fitness journey, shedding pounds and tumming his body, going from 260 to 225. His desire for me only intensified, and he couldn't keep his hands off me. We went on dates, danced, and took regular walks. He continued to be a supportive partner around the house, and his eyes always conveyed his love and longing for me. It was incredible to think that even after 2 decades together, he still looked at me with such desire, something any woman would cherish. But despite all this, for reasons I couldn't explain, I still found myself unable to reciprocate his affection during that time. I initially attributed my decreased sexual desire to early menopause. Our physical intimacy had dwindled to about 3 times a month, and I was usually a one-and-done kind of person. In contrast, my husband's desire for more was unrelenting. He even suggested couple counseling as a solution, but I stubbornly declined, allowing my selfishness to cloud my judgment. The turning point arrived when a new manager joined my office a few days after my birthday. He was a bit younger and undeniably handsome, and for some inexplicable reason, he developed an interest in me. I initially brushed off his advances, but as time passed, my indifference transformed into casual conversation. Eventually, he started flirting, and I revealed my wedding ring. Yet, after 2 months of constant flirting, I found myself reciprocating, sharing details of my life with him, and, to my dismay, thinking about him more and more. In hindsight, I realized it was the beginning of an emotional affair, but at the time, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My husband began to sense that something was amiss. We had a heated argument about it, which, in my mind, began when he tried to kiss me. I unintentionally made a disgusted face, not directed at him but rather at the thoughts of this other man who occupied my mind. A week after that incident, I decided to meet the new manager at a cafe with the intention of telling him to stay away, that I couldn't continue this. However, before I could utter a word, he kissed me, and my thoughts went blank. That marked the commencement of our 6-month affair. During this time, I found myself doing things with this man that my ex-husband had longed for. I was more eager, more willing, and constantly in the mood. It felt like a new and exciting experience, and as a result, my intimacy with my husband suffered. Although we did have occasional encounters, my behavior toward him grew increasingly critical and belittling, and I'm filled with shame when I reflect on how I treated him during that period. It wasn't until my brother came to visit and revealed that my ex-husband had confided in him about his deepening depression and thoughts of separation that I snapped out of it. He believed that I no longer loved him and that he was falling out of love with me. This revelation jolted me back to reality. I immediately ended the affair, resigned from my job, and resolved to make my husband feel loved and wanted again. I had resolved to fix my marriage, to become a better wife, but the universe had other plans. One day, my affair partner unexpectedly showed up at my house, carrying a box of office belongings I had requested. We spoke briefly. He saw answers, questioning what he had done wrong. I told him I needed to mend my marriage and asked him to leave. However, he pleaded for one last encounter, and foolishly, I agreed. We retreated to the guest room, where our liaison took a tragic turn. I lost track of time in the heat of the moment. Suddenly, my affair partner jerked back violently, and there was a deafening bang. As I sat up, I saw my ex-husband standing there, his eyes bloodshot, tears streaming down his face, lips trembling with pain. My affair partner lay on the floor, and there was a gaping hole in the wall. In the chaos that ensued, my ex-husband and affair partner clashed violently. I screamed, trying to intervene, but desperation led me to jump on my ex's back, resulting in me being thrown to the floor. Everything blurred for a moment. When I regained clarity, my ex-husband had my affair partner pinned down, and he was on the phone, his face a mask of determination. Moments later, the police arrived, handcuffing my ex-husband, while paramedics tended to my severely injured affair partner, who needed reconstructive surgery on his face. At the hospital, I faced a barrage of emotions from my family, my father's silent, shaming gaze, my brother's furious accusations, and my mother's misguided attempts at comfort, which only fueled my father's anger. My affair partner's wife also confronted me, revealing a truth I had been oblivious to. He was married. This revelation added another layer of guilt and remorse. In the aftermath, my boys stayed with their grandparents, refusing to talk to me. My daughters were equally distant. My ex-husband, too wounded to see me, refused my attempts to visit him in jail. Despite my brother's efforts, he ensured my ex was transferred to a correctional facility, where he would serve his sentence. a stark reminder of the irreversible consequences of my actions. To keep an eye on my ex-husband during the trial, I asked my brother if he could relay a message for me. His response was bitter, telling me to go to hell. The trial marked the first time in 3 months that I saw him, and the anger in his eyes cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. Even in our angriest moments, he used to look at me with love, but during the trial, it was pure hatred. Overwhelmed by the emotions, I excused myself to the restroom to cry. As the trial days passed, I was forced to recount my affair in agonizing detail for everyone in the courtroom to hear. When I mentioned the duration of the affair, my ex-husband looked utterly crushed, and my father stood up and walked out in disgust. During his testimony, I learned that he had come home to surprise me with lunch and a romantic weekend trip for 2 in the Catskills. He had meticulously planned a romantic getaway, only to walk in on us, and his reaction was visceral. He later explained that, upon seeing us together, the affair partner ordered him to step aside, and my ex-husband snapped. He violently beat the affair partner, only stopping when he tossed me away. My ex-husband quickly called 911, and the courtroom played the recording of his voice, filled with pain and sobs, as he followed the operator's instructions. It was a heart-wrenching moment. The affair partner couldn't verbally testify and was heavily medicated, so they displayed images of his injuries, which made me physically ill. I felt responsible for this man's severe injuries, as my ex-husband had smashed his eye socket, cheekbones, and destroyed his jaw to the point where the bone fragments were too small to reconstruct. My ex-husband was subsequently charged with a third-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years. This decision led to protests from my sons and anguished cries from my daughters and his family, a sound that still haunts me. The first 3 months that followed were torturous. I was sued by my affair partner's wife for alienation of affection, and my ex-husband filed for divorce. My eldest son moved out, while the other son withdrew into his room, and my twins rebelled fiercely. My former sister-in-laws physically attacked me in a store, and my ex-husband's mother spat in my face when I tried to apologize to her. My father and brother refused to speak to me, and even my lifelong friends were divided over the situation. I eventually had to find a new job since there was no money coming in, and I had almost depleted our savings. I was essentially blacklisted in my field due to the negative publicity surrounding the trial, so I resorted to working in retail and took on a seasonal position as an H&R Block adjuster during the tax rush. I came perilously close to losing our home, and my ex-husband refused to allow me to visit him. Every letter I sent was returned unopened, and crying in the shower became almost a daily ritual. My parents' marriage was strained as my mother persistently defended me, while my brother continued to ignore my existence. It was a bleak time, and even my lifelong friendships began to crumble. Dark thoughts of ending everything began to creep into my mind, contemplating a way out of the unbearable pain. I carried the weight of guilt on my shoulders, watching my belongings disappear as I drifted into isolation. The burden became too much to bear, eventually leading me to seek help from a therapist. She didn't mince words. She scolded me, telling me that I had grown complacent in my relationship with my ex-husband. I hadn't seen him as a husband but more like a friend with benefits, and I had treated him as such. She was right. I had taken him for granted. Nearly a year had passed, a year of silence from my children. When I cooked dinner, they would quietly collect their food and retreat to their rooms, refusing to even glance in my direction. I had my share of meltdowns, begging them to speak to me, but it was met with silence. My brother got married, and I wasn't invited, though my kids were. I continued trying to visit my ex-husband, hoping he would add me to the visitor list, but I was consistently denied access. My letters remained unanswered, plunging me further into depression. Then, out of the blue, my brother showed up at my house. It was the first time he had visited since the trial, and he was clearly unhappy. He came to scold me, emphasizing that my ex was in the infirmary after a violent incident. An inmate had attempted to sexually assault him in his cell, resulting in my ex-husband getting stabbed in the stomach and the inmate suffering a broken spine. My brother's words cut deep, and I cried for days, acknowledging that in many ways I was responsible for this outcome. I made persistent efforts to visit my ex in the infirmary and continued writing letters, but they were consistently returned. For 4 more years, I tried to reach out to him, with no success. Thankfully, our children visited their father frequently, and it was through them that I learned he had been placed in protective custody by my brother after the attack. Over the years, my eldest attended the same college as my ex-husband and pursued the same major, but he only maintained contact with his siblings. He had no desire to speak to me or visit our house during the holidays, choosing instead to spend time with his grandparents. My other son followed a similar path, going to the same college and refusing to contact me. As for my twins, they were hard on me, but their visits to their father improved their mood. Whenever they became excessively rebellious, their uncles stepped in to set them straight. My brother and I still hardly spoke, despite my attempts to reach out. I even tried to visit his wife when they had their first child, but I was asked to leave. My mother continued to keep me informed about the happenings in their lives, while my father maintained his refusal to acknowledge me. Then, at the beginning of May this year, my children returned home, seemingly happy, a rare sight that brought a glimmer of hope. I didn't understand why, and at that point, I didn't even care. My children were back home for 4 months, and I did everything in my power to show them how sorry I was. Although I was mostly ignored, they were talking to me, and those conversations brought immense joy. Finally, I was able to know what was happening in their lives. My eldest had been dating a woman for over a year. My second-born was excelling on a college track team, and even my girls were starting to talk to me again. Witnessing their smiles, hearing their laughter, and sharing meals together felt like a cherished dream I never thought I'd experience again. I missed those moments deeply. Towards the end of August, I was eagerly preparing for the twins' first day of their senior year, which also happened to be their 18th birthday. I enthusiastically shared my excitement about their upcoming birthday party, telling them all the plans I had in mind. But without hesitation, my girls asked if we could celebrate it on a different day. I was confused. I thought we were making progress. When I asked why, one of them bluntly said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party, and I don't want you near him." Her words stunned me. I inquired when their father was released, and they informed me that he had been out since the end of April due to good behavior. The news shattered me. He was back in their lives, and they seemed happier because of it. It wasn't our healing they were enjoying. It was having him back. I asked where he was staying, and they revealed he was living with my brother. Driven by desperation, I tried reaching out. I attempted to call him, went to his place holding all the letters he had returned throughout the years, and glimpsed him briefly through the door crack. I cried out his name, but my brother promptly asked me to leave. I handed him the letters and departed. As I reached the driveway, I heard his voice and turned around, only to be met with his cold rejection. He handed back my letters, emphasizing, "You forgot this." My pleas fell on deaf ears as he walked away. My children, witnessing the scene, stared at me, their eyes void of love. In that moment, I realized that my children were merely tolerating me. Despite the overwhelming odds, I still clung to a sliver of hope. I wanted to fix this, to tell him how profoundly sorry I was for my selfishness, for destroying what we once had. I longed for the chance to express how much I missed him, how deeply I regretted my actions. I yearned for him to forgive me, to talk to me, to be by my side again. I wanted our family reunited, but deep down, I knew I didn't deserve it. Even if, by some miracle, we were reunited, it could never be the same. My selfishness had irreparably altered everything, and I wished I could turn back time and undo the damage I had caused. Now let's delve into the opinions from the community. Opinion number 1 expressed deep sympathy for your ex-husband, highlighting how your own account revealed emotional abuse and dismissive behavior toward a man who always made you feel loved and desired. This person emphasized the importance of surrounding yourself with friends who hold you accountable for your actions, rather than those who condone your behavior. They advise you to work on yourself and seek therapy to move forward. Opinion number 2 offered a stark perspective, suggesting that it might be best for you to stop trying to reconnect with your past family, as your attempts could be perceived as harassment. The advice was to acknowledge the irreparable damage and respect the boundaries set by your ex-husband and children. Opinion number 3 emphasized the gravity of the situation, pointing out that your children cut ties with you due to the severity of the events. They stressed the need to respect your ex-husband's choice to distance himself and advised you to focus on moving forward, improving your relationship with your children, and being realistic about the future. This opinion emphasized the importance of accepting the situation rather than holding on to unrealistic dreams. As for the viewers, they were encouraged to share their thoughts, subscribe, and like the video to support the channel. The overall sentiment expressed was one of understanding the tragedy of your situation, but urging you to accept the reality and move forward for the sake of your own well-being.
I, a 29-year-old male, and Erica, a 27-year-old female, had been in a relationship for 2 years and got engaged 4 months ago. After our engagement, Erica moved into my house, and we split the expenses in a way that I covered the mortgage while she took care of utilities, groceries, and household items. We planned to add her to the house's ownership after our marriage to ensure she had equity in it. Erica's best friend, Leah, who is also 27, has been her friend since high school. I haven't particularly liked Leah, but I've always been polite because I know she'll be a part of our lives. However, my issue with Leah is that she often acts like my home is hers. For instance, she frequently brings her rather troublesome boyfriend over. Additionally, she tends to speak to me disrespectfully in my own house, as if she and Erica co-own it. One day, I discovered that some of my tools were missing from my garage, and upon checking my security camera, I found that Leah and her boyfriend had taken them when they were with Erica. When I asked Erica about it, she claimed they were just borrowing the tools and would return them. It took multiple reminders to finally get them back weeks later. I also have a valuable wine and liquor collection. One Friday evening when I was working late, I heard clinking bottles, and I found Leah behind my bar. She claimed Erica said it was okay to borrow a bottle for her party and that she pay for it. I told her it was not okay and asked her to leave. When I discussed this with Erica, she couldn't recall authorizing Leah to take a bottle. At this point, I expressed my discomfort with Leah being in my house. Erica understood, but she didn't take my concerns seriously. The last straw was when I couldn't find my golf clubs, which are a significant investment for me. I reviewed the security camera footage and discovered that Leah had used my garage code to take them. I lost my temper, called Erica, and insisted she get my clubs back immediately. Erica explained that Leah had asked for the garage code to retrieve some clothes from her closet, and Leah had taken my clubs along with her things. Leah claimed her boyfriend needed them for work. I eventually got my clubs back after almost 4 days, and they were dirty. I sat Erica down and told her that if I ever saw Leah in my house again, I'd call the police without discussion. Erica got upset, stating that Leah was her best friend, and it wasn't fair to ban her from our home. I pointed out that this was a recurring issue, and since Erica's possessions weren't affected, she didn't seem to care. I suggested Erica could visit Leah at her apartment, but she said she couldn't because Leah didn't like her apartment, and her boyfriend was always there, making Erica uncomfortable. Now I'm receiving the silent treatment and being called unreasonable, but I don't believe I'm in the wrong. Before diving into the update, I want to express gratitude for the insightful comments received earlier. Many of you advised against putting my fiancé on the deed to my home and even questioned the viability of our marriage. It became clear that the issue wasn't just about Leah. It was a deeper problem with my fiancée, Erica. I confronted Erica about the situation when I found Leah's car parked in our driveway. I insisted that Leah leave, and despite her protests, I made it clear that I would involve the police if necessary. Erica, in her attempt to defend Leah, couldn't sway my decision. I sat her down and showed her this post. After reading through the comments for 20 minutes, Erica's response indicated she didn't grasp the gravity of our situation. That was my breaking point. I asked Erica to hold out her hand, remove the engagement ring, and ended our relationship. She pleaded, apologizing and promising to sever ties with Leah, but I couldn't ignore the fundamental lack of trust I felt toward her. Erica retreated to our room while I began packing her belongings in the kitchen. I reached out to her parents, informing them of the situation. To my surprise, they shared that Leah had long been banned from their home since high school due to similar issues. They expressed their anger and disappointment and agreed to come this weekend to collect Erica and her belongings. The weight lifted off my shoulders is immense, and I can't help but feel a sense of relief and resolution. Realizing the depth of my situation became possible because of this post. I sincerely thank each and every one of you. With newfound freedom, I'm eager to indulge in my hobbies, like playing golf with my reclaimed clubs. The prospect of embracing single life is both exciting and liberating. Your support has meant the world to me, and I can't express my gratitude enough. As for my next story, I'm seeking your perspective on a situation with my girlfriend. Early in our relationship, she decided to test my consideration by canceling a date, one where we were planning to take our relationship to the next level. It was a significant drive for me, and she waited until I was halfway there before letting me know. Despite her claims of feeling unwell, her timing seemed deliberate, testing my reaction. I'd offered my understanding and even suggested visiting her to help, but she declined. She later explained that this test was pivotal for our relationship, emphasizing my consideration. However, I can't shake my frustration. I feel she lacked consideration for my time and effort, seemingly inconveniencing me intentionally. When I confronted her about this, she half-heartedly apologized, downplayed the situation, and dismissed my feelings. We ended up arguing, leaving me feeling like an insensitive jerk for getting upset over what seems like a small issue. The fact that she lacks remorse and even makes me feel guilty for being rightfully upset is troubling. It feels like a manipulative and gaslighting tactic, raising several red flags about her behavior. Your insights are invaluable, and I'm struggling to navigate this situation. I've come to realize that you're absolutely right. I seem to be dating another version of my ex. It's disheartening when the person who should be administering the relationship test fails so miserably at it themselves. What's even worse is their inability to consider the possibility that the other person might be dissatisfied with their behavior. She should have kept her little test to herself. Your conduct on that day was appropriate and considerate. Kudos to you for handling it well. Now, moving forward, you might find yourself questioning every situation, wondering if it's a test. And frankly, it might be. It's crucial to have a discussion about this. It's not a minor issue to be upset about. Your concerns are valid, and addressing them is essential. As for the next story, titled, Am I the A-hole for buying a door for my son behind my husband's back? I must say your husband's behavior is incredibly controlling and frankly scary. It's deeply concerning that he believes your son shouldn't have a door to his room until he's 18, essentially denying him any privacy. I understand your perspective. Teens deserve some freedom and privacy within reason. It's not just about personal space, it's also a matter of safety. Without a proper door, your son is at risk in case of emergencies like a fire. If a fire were to break out, he would have no barrier to prevent smoke and flames from entering his room, putting his safety in jeopardy. Your decision to provide him with a door is not only about granting him privacy, but also ensuring his safety. While your husband may see it as a challenge to his authority, your son's well-being should take precedence. It's unfortunate that your husband reacted this way, but your intentions were rooted in your son's safety and comfort. Navigating this situation may require a difficult conversation, but your concern for your son's safety and privacy is completely valid. Your husband's behavior is indeed troubling, and it puts both you and your son at risk. It's disheartening to see the kind of man he has turned out to be. I urge you to prioritize finding a safe and secure living arrangement for you and your son. I have genuine concerns that his mistreatment may escalate if you continue to stand up for your rights, especially with your recent act of giving your son a door. I genuinely worry that staying in a home with a potentially violent person is not a safe option. Nobody should have to endure such a situation. It's evident that your husband made the unilateral decision to deny your son a door without considering your input. By now, you've shown him what it feels like to have one, and he clearly dislikes it. The question I have is why you've stayed in this situation for so long, enduring a man who treats your son in this manner. The notion that a man automatically holds authority and dominion over his household as the ultimate ruler is unjust and outdated. While you're not the a-hole for getting your son a door, it's essential to recognize that this may be an ongoing battle throughout his teenage years. If the situation doesn't change, it's unlikely he'll return once he turns 18. There are larger issues at play here than just the door, and maltreatment of your son is a severe concern. It's clear that your husband's difficult upbringing doesn't excuse his mistreatment of your son. It's worth noting that you had your son when you were 21 and your husband was 32, making it all the more important to ensure a safe and supportive environment for your child's well-being. The age gap between you and your husband, combined with his consistent attempts to suppress your voice and punish both you and your son for questioning his authority, is deeply concerning. The fact that you feel compelled to resort to secretive actions to advocate for your child's well-being raises alarming red flags. I fear that your husband might harbor an unhealthy, authoritarian mindset about the role of the head of the household. Regardless of his upbringing or religious beliefs, there is no justification for his controlling behavior. It's crucial for you to consider whether the current status quo aligns with what you genuinely want for yourself and your child. Music. In the last story, the question arises, am I the a-hole for canceling a vacation with my fiancé and taking my daughter on a vacation instead? My daughter, Maya, who is 16, struggles with severe anxiety. Despite being in therapy and medication, there are certain areas, particularly school-related matters, where we need to tread lightly due to her condition. My policy has always been that as long as she tries her best and passes, I am content. My fiancé, however, has been pressuring Maya to work harder and achieve better grades, suggesting she aim for straight A's to get into a good college. I've consistently shut down these demands, stating that her current grades are suitable for her plans to attend community college and then transfer to a local state school. Here's the issue. My fiancé made a secret deal with Maya behind my back. He promised her a trip to Disneyland if she managed to achieve straight A's this semester, withholding it if she received a B. Maya, eager to experience Disneyland, kept this pact hidden from me. Over time, I noticed her growing stress, attributing it to the challenges of her junior year. However, last week, she finally broke down, revealing the deal she had made with my fiancé. I was furious upon learning this. Seeing the toll it had taken on her, I canceled the hotel reservation for the ski trip my fiancé, Maya, and I were planning. Instead, I booked a last-minute trip for Maya and me to Disneyland and Universal Studios this week. Maya has been in a fragile state, experiencing panic attacks and stress-induced sickness, so I prioritized her well-being over the initially planned vacation. Maya truly deserves this trip after all her hard work this year. However, my fiancé is expecting me to cover half of the cancellation fees and activities that can be refunded. We got into a heated argument, and we're currently not speaking. Deep down, I know this relationship is over, but I wanted to confirm if I was in the wrong here. I understand what he might have intended to do, but this was clearly not the way. He undid all the progress Maya achieved through therapy and ended up hurting her more than helping her. Besides, what does he expect her to do if she gets into a good school? Stress her even more with a demanding university environment? It's all messed up. I appreciate your support for my decision to stand up for my daughter. I'm looking forward to enjoying this trip with her and having a wonderful mother-daughter experience. Regarding her education, I agree that starting at a community college for 2 years is a smart and more supportive approach, especially considering her struggles with anxiety, which she is still working to control. Your point about my fiancé manipulating my daughter and convincing her to keep secrets from me is alarming. His actions endangered her mental and physical health, all for his misguided belief in what he thinks is the only path to success. His manipulation could have had dangerous consequences, and I now see it as a pattern in his relationship with her, establishing that it's acceptable to do things behind my back if it benefits him. As for the fees, the more I reflect on it, the more I feel it should be his responsibility to pay for them. He manipulated everyone involved, including me, and I shouldn't be responsible for the financial repercussions of his actions.